shame us, but they don't speak the language. No, we're not nameless, we're not faceless, we were born for greatness. Somebody sound the alarm. Fire was set in the dark. It's time that you know. No, we're not nameless, we're not faceless, we were born for greatness. It doesn't matter if the world is gone mad, if we just hold on, if we just hold on, yeah. The sky is falling and the world is gone mad, and we sing our songs and we just hold on, yeah. So if you're running, stop running. One life, one chance, start living. Sing it louder just to let the world know. No, we're not nameless, we're not faceless, we were born for greatness. We're not nameless, we're not faceless, we were born for greatness. We're not nameless, we're not faceless, we were born for greatness. Somebody sound the alarm. It's time that you know. It doesn't matter if the world is gone mad, if we just hold on, if we just hold on, yeah. Sing it louder just to let the world know. No, we're not nameless, we're not faceless, we were born for greatness. No, we're not nameless, we're not faceless, we were born for greatness. We were born for greatness. No, we're not nameless, we're not faceless, we were born for greatness.
And welcome. So I was just trying to find a mute button then, and yeah, found it eventually. Welcome. Sunday Night Live. So we thought, obviously, what a day yesterday. Quite a sad day yesterday, but we thought we would have a special. What else is there to do? No one can go out. So we'll all stay in and have a discussion. We're joined, as you can see, by Ray Armfield. Ray, good evening. Oh, if I put Ray's sound on, that would really help. Sorry, Ray, I did put your sound on. Okay. I was practicing for George. Ray, good evening. How are you?
Hello, fine, thanks.
Good. And Rob Boyce, hello, mate.
How's it going, Stu? You all right? Thank you very much for having me on.
So we've done a loan deal with the Wombles and a Dream podcast. We've done a loan deal with Boyce, only because he talks sense and the others, to be fair, Lee just talked, bless him, and I don't know actually what he was saying, to be fair, so it was a safe bet. But welcome aboard. We've got quite a lot of people watching already, actually, which is really good. So, yeah, what are we in the 40s at the moment? So, for what we do, we're going to split this in two halves. So, Ray and Rob are going to join us for the first half, and then we're going to have George and Anne-Marie Godfrey for the second, probably around about 8-ish on that sort of side of it. But before we go through, so I think we start at the beginning, Ray. Yesterday, first half, all looked. That was probably the best first half we played for a little while, Ray, would you say?
It wasn't bad, was it? I thought the first half was quite good. We were positive. We were on the front foot. If you want to pick out a couple of standout players from the first half, I thought George Dobson looked neat and tidy. I thought Nesta looked good going forward. Maybe not quite so good coming back. But I thought, all we really needed was a goal and the first goal. But we went in level at half time, and I thought, well, if we can replicate that in the second half, just get a lucky break, which, goodness me, don't we deserve one? But we didn't get it, did we?
And I think that's the problem, though, isn't it? It's just like, and the problem is sometimes you get work, you get your own luck, you work, and but you sometimes deserve a little bit of the rub of the green. But yeah, we just didn't get that. Well, I'm just thinking, obviously, we had before the game started, Alex Rudyard, who was guaranteed to get a booking in that game, injured himself in the warm-up. Whether it was practicing taking people out, we could probably argue. But Callum Riley come in and Paul also on the bench. Do you think that made much of a difference at all?
I personally don't think it impacted the result. I think everyone looked up for it from the start of the game. Like Ray said, very much on the front foot. I think every player gave 100%, looked up for it. We even got in some really good positions. There was a chance which Shane had, which he squared to Piggott, and I think he should have pulled the trigger there. I don't think Woodyard change the result for me.
No, we bought Paul Ossie in, so he's our 19th man. Difficult to know with Ossie at the moment what plans are in there. It looks like Nesta Guinness-Walker has got that position at the moment. I think one of the things that I noticed yesterday was we done the high press in the first half, which when we were successful early in the season, we tend to do that. And it felt like the high press was, Piggott, Longman, Dobson, who, to be fair, has got an engine on him, and Jack Redoni. Do you think that was hard to carry on all through the second half, Ray? Do you think in terms of fitness levels, or what do you think happened with that?
I don't see why not. I mean, when you're the home team, you need to be offensive in every sense of the word, maybe. I didn't really see us busting the gut in the first half. I just thought we looked reasonably comfortable. So I was just hoping for more of the same and with something to show for it. But obviously, that first goal, we've seen countless times during the season. If you play a back three, it just seems to need one diagonal pass to the opposition winger to open us up. He bears down on goal, gets past his man. The keeper has to come out to narrow the angle, and it's just a sideways pass, and it's either tapped in or bundled in.
Yeah.
How many times have we seen that?
Yeah, and the problem with, and also, unfortunately, Jerome was a handful all out the game, and John, our new signings at Johnson, done a lazy back pass. Which you don't really want to do in that.
Yeah.
So we were warned. We weren't, Rob. We were warned, weren't we, with that? But I suppose was it how easy they got through us that was? Again, our resilience at the moment is just not there. We can't. As soon as a goal goes in, we sort of know we've got to get 2 goals to win a game, and we haven't done that for a little while, Rob.
No, you can tell the team's lacking confidence at the moment, isn't it? The second that first goal went in, you kind of felt like heads dropped, and then obviously to concede that deflection 2 minutes later, you felt like it was game over. We huffed and puffed all throughout the game, but I think you can tell the players are low on confidence at the moment, and that's the second that goal went in, the heads dropped, unfortunately.
Yeah. And Glyn's even said that, hasn't he? Glyn in the interview that obviously he must have done an interview with the press after the game, and that was sort of pushed out, and he sort of said that was the first time the heads have gone. And to be fair, he's probably right. He's pretty right. And I wonder whether that sort of sign sort of maybe thought that maybe I'm not going to be, I'm not going to be able to turn this around. We did make subs. Obviously, they scored the 2 goals. The one that hit the one post, the other post, and the other post. It just think sometimes you see those shots go across the line, don't you, and then out for a goal kick, but it ain't going to happen for us. Substitution we made. We brought Chislett, Zach Robinson, Paul Ossie, took off Jack Redoni, Luke O'Neill, and Guinness-Walker. It looks like Luke O'Neill, we're literally just trying to get as much as out as we can, Ray, isn't it? He's obviously back early. We're just trying to get 3 minutes, aren't we?
I think Glyn seemed to rate Luke O'Neill very, very highly. Whether he rushed him back or not, or tried to get too many minutes in his legs too early, I'm not sure. But he's the older head in the back 3, back 5, whatever you want to call it. Yeah. And I think his presence is useful. And he's probably at the back, the nearest thing that we've got to a leader. I think we're missing Ben Hennigan. When we signed him, I thought that was quite a coup because he's a threat in both boxes, and he's not a League One player really. I think he could probably play in the Championship if he wanted to. And we then saw what he could do in both boxes, and then it's injured. So there's your fulcrum gone, if you like.
Yeah, and unfortunately, when you look at the bench yesterday, there isn't many game changers, is there? Chislett has done well, but when you look at a game changer, when we're relying on Zach Robinson, who's definitely one for the future, but I think we'll all accept that if the non-league was playing at the moment, Conference South, North, he probably would have gone out on loan and got his got his games that way, and we're sort of chucking him in. It's a lot of pressure, isn't it? And I think the problem is they seem to get more confident as we sort of just didn't do anything, did we? We just saw the minutes out, right?
It was all too comfortable really for them, wasn't it? As soon as that second goal went in, you thought we're just going to huff and puff and get nothing yet again. I I think also, you're looking at the spine of the team, and when you're missing Hennigan at the back, you're then looking towards the front to do something, and then you're looking for someone like Ollie Palmer, and he's missing as well. He'd have been ideal to sort of throw on at some point during the second half just to try and rough them up a bit. But without him, we've got nobody who can do that.
Yeah, and Rob, Glyn got a booking. I don't know if you saw. I don't know if you turned off by then, but that sort of told me something, because to be fair, when I've chatted to Glyn before, he's never a favourite of the referees and stuff like that. But him getting, I don't know. Yesterday, I felt him getting a booking and showing his anger, in a way, showed how he was feeling. Did you think the same?
It just makes me wonder if he knew the writing was on the wall after that game. It was 2-0 at the time. He got the booking. Did he know things were slowly coming to an end? I feel sorry for Glyn. He led the Dons out to an empty plough lane at the start of the season, and he's left at an empty plough lane now. So I think he was frustrated on the touchline. Probably just felt a bit helpless. Like you said, the 3 subs he brought on were all, they're all young. They're not really game changers, are they? They're very much like for like, inexperienced, and I think the booking was just frustration.
Yeah. Well, at least he hasn't got to serve it now. It's always pleasures on that and that sort of side of it. By the way, we've got loads watching. Send us any questions, any thoughts. I've seen one for James Scorer. What's the situation with a new manager? We're going to go through it in sort of like chronological order. So we're going to go just through sort of like what happened yesterday, then obviously the evening, and we're sort of touch upon where we think we're going to end up with obviously the recruitment side of it. But yeah, it was. We were just discussing it, weren't we? It went very quiet after yesterday, didn't it? Rob, did you think the writing was on the wall? I know we should never judge. We should never judge one game to change a situation. But was yesterday's defeat, in the manner of the defeat, a real big say in what happened afterwards?
But I think, second half not having a single shot was quite telling, wasn't it? And it's not just a one-off game. I mean, I know we played them, but, last few games, I think if you look at the stats, we're down on just about everything: goals conceded, shots, goals going in. It really has dipped, since we hit this bad run of form. So, I mean, I wasn't a Glyn out person, but you could tell after social media exploded, and I personally thought he might be given the Wigan and the Rochdale games. I think there might have been a target between when Joe Palmer sent a message out on YouTube to then, maybe a target of points. But at the same time, I'm not surprised that what's happened with Glyn even has happened at this moment.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because obviously Joe Palmer did that the Thursday after the Pompey defeat, if I remember properly, which meant we then had Crewe, Doncaster. Ray, did you obviously? I think that some of us were quite happy that Joe had done that, that sort of side of it. Were you surprised then that it changed so quickly within a week? Were you surprised by that?
I'm not sure. Perhaps in hindsight, Joe's original message was the sort of traditional vote of confidence that directors give to managers. I think perhaps just the manner of the way which we lost yesterday, particularly in the second half, it might have been the straw that broke the camel's back. And I think maybe we were looking for something yesterday, and then to take that impetus forward to the Wigan and the Rochdale games. And I just think it was probably the right time to push the button. But I think the thing to bear in mind is, we're not in a crisis here. I think two years ago we were 10 points adrift at the bottom and looking down and out. We're not this time. We're a point from safety. Plenty of games to go. The likes of Rochdale, Wigan, Burton, Swindon still to come to Plough Lane. Yes, I know it's not a fortress yet, but it needs to be. It's still very much in our own hands. So let's not, throw baby out with the bathwater here.
Yeah, just looking at Dominic Francis, Bezo, take us back to the CCL, but at least it would be entertaining. Well, to be fair, Bezo wasn't with us in the Combine Counties, and if he was, wow, that would have been a change room, wouldn't it? Crikey, with some of the fruitcakes. Could you imagine when Danny Oakins? Oh dear, that would have been. Yeah. I don't think that would have lasted too long. But I say, on a more serious note from Dominic, who is our Vinny, Fuller, or Bullman? That's an interesting thing, Rob, isn't it? We look back to that team that got promoted from League One, and if you look at the players like Darius is playing in in Championship, Lyle's playing the Championship, Tom Elliott's playing for Salford, who might as well be in the Championship whenever they go in there. It's difficult, isn't it? That team, we've never really matched it, have we?
No, we haven't. Ever since we broke up that team, we've never really replaced it or replaced the leaders in that dressing room. You could go for that whole League Two team, and it wasn't just Ballman and Fuller. You had Paul Robinson, Darius Charles, Akin Fenra, Lyle Taylor. The list goes on and on and on in that team. And I think that's another thing which is difficult at the moment. We lack leaders, we lack characters in this squad, from what I can see. I mean, it's hard to judge when you're not at the games. From judging far, I don't really know the signings. It feels like this season.
Yeah.
Obviously watching an eye follow, but yeah, it does feel like we lack experienced heads. But then at the same time, they're normally the more expensive players, isn't it? I mean, I'm sure Glyn might have wanted to sign a 30-year-old experienced centre half, but at the end of the day, with the current pandemic, we can't just go chucking money at these type of signings.
Do you know what? It's interesting. One thing I was looking at yesterday as the minutes were ticking down, and you're thinking, just don't score a third, just don't score a fourth. Mm. But when I looked at it, that team, I know what you're saying, Rob, because I think this team now is not detached, because that's not a word I'd like to use, but we don't really know. If you think about it, we've got Sam Walker, a loanee. We've got Donald Johnson, a loanee. Shocker we got in as he's now, to be fair, Shocker's having a great game with that Luke and Hill coming back in. You look for the midfield, Dobson, Riley. Do you know what I mean? Like it looks a shadow of the team that finished last season, Rob.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. That at the moment, we do look a shadow of the team of last season, but at the same time, this is the same team which gave us the best ever start in League One. As Ray said, it's not. I think social media has gone a bit over the top. We're not 10 points rooted at the bottom of the table. We're 1 point off safety, and we did get off to a really good start in League One. So there also is talent amongst this bunch, or there is. We have shown or proven that we can get the results at some of the grounds. For example, we beat Peterborough earlier on in the season and picked up some great results. So
yeah, do you know what? Social media has been challenging. I know when we were doing Back to Plough Lane earlier in the season, if we won, it was everyone was really high. If we lost, it was like we're going to get relegated. There was no middle ground. Social media for the last couple of weeks, it's been a bit painful, Ray, isn't it, to watch? It's really been tough on people.
Yeah, I feel for Glyn, because you got to think, he's a human being as well. He's got a family. He's away from them. He's got parents that have had COVID, who he's obviously worried about. And I hope he stays away from social media. I hope he did, because obviously anybody can think they're a manager from behind a keyboard, but it's the modern age, isn't it? And I think with us all being cooped up, it just gives more people an excuse to sort of vent and rant, really. It might be good for them, but it's probably not good for the club to hear. It's not what we're about, really, is it? It's not our DNA.
No, and it's not. Yeah, it's not normal times, is it? And I must admit, it feels like people locked down and seeing. I suppose seeing players at Plough Lane as well. The amount of times I hear, we spent all this money on Plough Lane and the players are not performing. I know from somebody who's been fortunate enough to be at a game at Plough Lane, there's no atmosphere whatsoever. And I chatted to Glyn on Thursday and said, "How are you going to deal with it?" Because as big as that game is, if there's no fans there, it just dilutes it, doesn't it? It just becomes a game.
Yeah.
Do you think we struggle? Do you think we struggle with that? Because I feel that our team needs that fan support, like most teams do. But we're a team that doesn't buy the finished product. We buy teams that progress, coach, and stuff like that. Do you think that's just been a real difficult thing? Because we've lost the last 5 at Plough Lane.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a factor. I mean, if we'd be talking in normal times now, I think just the bounce that we would have had going to Plough Lane and having if not a packed house every week, then a decent crowd, it would have pulled us through 1 or 2 games, and certainly pulled us through 1 or 2 situations during games. I'm not sure if I'm right, but I think the only time there's been any sort of crowd at one of our games this season was at Charlton, where we got the biggest hiding. So that could be a factor. who knows? But I mean, yesterday, I think you can look at it two ways, really. I mean, if they trooped off after losing the way they did, I'm sure the crowd would have let them know, shall we say, and possibly would have in previous home games as well.
Yeah, definitely.
So it can work both ways. But I mean, you know, it's always a bit toxic in those sort of games anyway. But I don't think yesterday would have been pleasant with a crowd.
No. So Rob, so if you look at the statement that Joe Palmer released, it was quite interesting actually. If you look at the sort of the tone of it, were you surprised when he said we were overachieving in the early part of this? It seemed a weird thing to put in there because if Glyn was overachieving, he did very well in that period, didn't he? It was a weird thing to put in the start of the statement. I thought personally. What was your thoughts on that?
It's hard to judge, isn't it? Because we don't know what the target is for the season. I mean, I would have thought the target for the club would be to avoid relegation. So I suppose when we were up to 11th place after beating Peterborough, you could argue, we was overachieving. But yeah, it was a bit of a strange statement. It does seem like Glyn and Joe have come to a mutual agreement. But yeah, I don't really know what to make of the bit about overachieving, to be honest with you. I mean, because my target in my head at the start of the season was to avoid relegation. And I think, we're in a relegation battle, and that's what I was kind of expecting at the start of the season.
I agree. It just felt a weird one with that. But, I think, obviously, Joe did say in there how, I think the wording was, let me just quickly get the wording so I don't misquote him, but it was, I don't know if I haven't got it, but it was basically saying in terms of the, relegation, we can't get relegated. Do you think, Ray, that's a massive thing? We know the financial side of it. We also potentially, we don't know, obviously, wage caps come in. We don't really know we don't know what League One's going to look like this year. We're hearing that social distancing could be in for the end of the season. Do you think Joe may have not panicked, but do you think that come into it as well? We just don't know what the finances is going to look like.
I'm not sure about panic. I think maybe sometimes a bit too much is made of the so-called budget table. I know we're traditionally down the bottom of that every year, and people say, "Oh, what about Accrington?" But I mean, obviously, circumstances are different there. I think it's easier to attract players, perhaps from the south and the north to the north, because house prices and the cost of living is cheaper. Rob and I were having this chat prior to coming on air. I mean, it must be very difficult for a club like us in the area where Wimbledon are to get, say, a player down from the north, particularly if he's a family man, just looking at property prices and just the general cost of living. It must be difficult. I mean, if we were in the provinces somewhere, I think it would be easier.
Do you know what? It's quite interesting when you are actually. You remind me when we interviewed Connell True when he first arrived. Asked where he was staying, and he was in Kingston. And I said, "Oh, crikey." I said, "You won't get a place like that in Birmingham." And he just went, "It's so expensive down here." He was just, I think Ben Hennigan also moved into something like Batsy Rise or something. And I'm like, he had a friend there. But you're right. No offence to Accrington, but you can blink and miss the high street when you go through Accrington. It's typical 2 up, 2 down, isn't it? And I think Accrington do us no favours. But then John Coleman knows this league inside out. You can imagine his contacts book. You can imagine the size of that the years that he's got. So they trust him. But we do get tarnished with that. Just got what we've got here. So Dubtronic is called in. Wrong decision by the board. Sacking managers after a bad run doesn't always work. Keeping managers that get the club can work out better over the long term. Great point. Long-term strategy. Long-term strategy, but short-term. Football fans are always going to react, Ray, aren't they?
They are, yeah. And I think, to be fair, Glyn hasn't and probably won't say that he didn't get a fair crack of the whip time-wise to try and turn things around. You can look at countless other clubs and say, well, they pressed the button far quicker than we have here. What is it, 2 points from 33 now?
Yeah.
That would do for most managers, really, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and I was looking at points per game because you never know when points per game may come into it. Let's hope it don't. Yeah. Worse than last season. But Rob, I remember after Peterborough, I remember I'm quite a statter on points per game. We were 1.4 points per game we're now 0.88 points per game. That is a massive slump.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked at it, if we continued that form, we'd finish with 41 points this season, which would finish us in the bottom two. So you sort of, I don't know how much Joe looks at stats, but every stat you looked at, Rob, it just wasn't there, was it?
No, it wasn't pleasant reading, whichever way you looked at it as. I mean, again, like I said earlier, I wasn't a Glyn out person. I mean, we referenced John Coleman, but he's been at Accrington 6 years, and I see people compare us to Accrington, Stanley, and Wickham. But what do their two managers have? They've both been in the job for 6 years. I mean, we got off to a really good start in League One this season, and I just think Glyn was unlucky with injuries, COVID, and then obviously the form dipped, and I would have liked for him to have turned it around, but it seemed like it just wasn't going to happen. And Joe Palmer thinks it's probably best to call it there and try to use the time in the second half of the season to try to get out of relegation.
Yeah, and from a personal point of view, yeah, I wasn't a Glyn out. I suppose I just like a bit of loyalty. I just don't like sackings. It just the culture at the moment is just to sack a manager when something goes wrong, isn't it? And I'm not necessarily. I always want us to be a bit different. I think after yesterday, though, I actually more thought that Glyn was struggling. And I think when you see someone struggling, and I think some of the things that he mentioned, where he said he was trying to change formation, tactic, try and do whatever he could to try and change the luck, it sort of reminded me of teams that we've seen before, Ray, like the Berries and the Chesterfields and that, when they just try and throw anything at it just to try and find that magic formula. And when you do that, you're sort of struggling a bit, aren't you?
You are, yeah. I mean, I'm old enough to remember when we got relegated with Dave Bassett in charge. And obviously, it's easy to look back and say, "Oh, we should have fired him then because we went down." But I can remember that year, they battled for their lives, if you like, in almost every game. And the last game of the season, we were bottom, and we played the second bottom team at home, which was Mansfield. We were both already down, and all the West Bank did for like virtually the 90 minutes was sing Bassett's name. And afterwards, the Mansfield manager said to Harry, "If that was me at home, they'd have been after my head."
Especially in Mansfield.
Different times, I know. Different times, but
yeah, you wouldn't have got out, would you? You'd be trying to find a secret passage if you were at Mansfield.
no.
Interesting you say that, though, Ray, because like I think social media definitely also amplifies fans' behaviour. What was it like in that season? So was there any unrest that they wanted Bassett to be out, or was it accepted that actually, do you know what, he deserved a chance to get them back up like he did?
Absolutely, yeah. And there were similarities with the current team because obviously there was a crop of young homegrown players in that team. And I think fans then could see that those were doing their best. And it was just maybe a case of letting them have another year together and maybe just getting one or two older players, older heads, just to guide them and just to make sure Bassett was the man. And of course, he was the man because he got us back up the following year, and the rest is history. So...
yeah,
and most of it very good history as well. So,
because to be fair, you don't see managers. I was trying to think the other day what team has gone down and kept their manager to have another chance. I couldn't think off the top of my head anyone does that, because you just press the button, don't you, and you start again on that.
Yeah, Rob, I can't think of anyone many recently. Certainly, no. I
couldn't. Rob, the sacking. It's been announced as a sacking, but it's mutual consent. That sort of side of it. 2 days for the transfer window. It's a real weird one, isn't it? It's sort of, are we thinking now that we've got nothing coming in? We know there was a deal for the Kingstonian player that's come in today, but that obviously looks like one that if it works, great. If it doesn't, we've lost nothing in there. I think it's not the worst thing to do. Do you think we're going to see any others come in, or do you think that's all we've got? Because if you're going to, we're going to go on a little bit later about recruiting a manager. A manager would like a window to do something. They've got nothing, have they? Whoever comes in.
No, I don't think we'll bring anyone else in now. I think that finished our transfer activity, getting that fourth striker in to replace Adam Roscoe. I think maybe if we had a budget, I think maybe whatever manager we have would like a left wing back, because we're quite inexperienced in that position. Obviously, we lost Seddon earlier in the window, but I think it makes sense to give Mark Robinson to the end of the season. He knows the players. He's been working with them. No manager can come in now and make many changes. And it's interesting with Mark Robinson because I'm sure he would have liked to have Anthony Hartigan in his squad. He was one of his main players in the academy, and I can't see that we probably can recall him now. So I don't think we'll see any more comings or goings unless we get a good offer for Pigott at the last minute. But then I think that might seal our fate to relegation, unfortunately, if we lose him. So it's a tricky one.
Yeah, do you know what? I was looking at Pigott stats since the beginning of the year, and they're not great. And I always worry sometimes when players know they've got a deal, they've got a free in the summer. They might know something's going on and stuff like that. I always worry sometimes with their form going into it because the form before that, I think in December, Joe Pigott was scoring in every other game, and Plough Lane he scored a goal. Well, whenever he turned up, he scored, didn't he? On that sort of side of it. Would we accept if we would have a bid come in? Would we accept it? Who would actually who would authorise it? Would Mark Robinson authorise it or Joe? What would you do, Ray?
I think the final say-so must be Joe. I mean, I'm not quite sure what Robbo's terms are, whether he's just literally holding the fort until maybe someone turns up next week, or he's been told you've got a certain number of games. I think back to when Simon Bassey became caretaker and he brought Stephen Reid in. Whether Robbo's going to get licensed to do that or not, or whether he'll just lean on Bezo a bit, we don't know. I mean, all I've read is that he's going to be the interim manager. I've no idea for how long or what his terms or whatever might be. As you say, there's still a couple of days left in the transfer window. Does he get a say in that? I don't know.
I'll just turn my phone off. With that sort of side of it. Let's have a look. We've got some questions. George Brown's got a few on here. Oh, actually, no. Alex Andrews is a good one. Bring back wingers. Miss players like Barchi. Yeah, we haven't had wingers for ages, have we? And I don't think Andy Bartram actually played for a club after, which I found amazing. But yeah, we haven't seen wingers for a little while, have we, Ray?
We don't really play the formation to use them now, though, do we?
No.
3-5-2, 5-3-2, whatever it is. I think now you're looking at your fullbacks as wing backs. So there's no real room for an orthodox winger. But I think if we were going to add somebody else, I would like to see a winger with a bit of pace, because pace is the one thing that you can't coach players, and it frightens opposition. And we don't really have anyone who could do that.
No, I agree. Let's have a look here. Oh, George Brown was just saying Norwich kept their manager this year. Relegated. But then, to be fair, look at the transfer budget they'd have had, and yeah, I think even Rob, I think even you can get Norwich out of the Championship. To be fair, mate, with the money they were.
I might give it a football manager or something.
It's like a football manager on a different level with a cheat, isn't it? On that sort of side of it. Let's have a look. James Willis, the worry was that we didn't seem to have a plan under Glyn. I couldn't tell what sort of football game we wanted to play. We weren't long ball and certainly not a possession team. Early in the season, you could definitely see how we were going to play, Rob. In terms of playing the wing backs high. I remember one of the games, I think for a goal kick, the wing backs were literally in their half. We played so high up and we pressed and we kept combined. What do you think changed? What do you think changed from that? Because me being a sad person as I am, I look back at those games just to remember what it was like when we were doing well and we were so organised. How did it change? What can you put your finger on it? Why you think it changed?
I think it's a accumulation of things. Like I said, I think injuries played a part. We never got a settled back line. I think COVID, we got hit with 2 bouts of COVID, postponement of that Wigan fixture twice. And I also just think, once we started letting in goals and once we started losing games, the confidence went, didn't it? It started draining. So the players probably don't have as much confidence to go press high and get the wing backs on high. And, and then once you press high and win the ball in the opposition third, it's a lot easier. Whilst if now we seem to be getting sitting deeper. And then when we do win the ball, we're just punting it long, it feels. Before there was a bit of a identification to get the ball in midfield, get it out wide and build up our play. I just felt like, there's a lot of a lot of, just clear it out nowadays. A lot of,
Yeah.
even yesterday against Milton Keynes, there just seemed to be a lot of balls which were just punted upfield to Bigot, and it's like, do what you can with it, rather than a structure and a slow process to get up the field.
Yeah, because I remember early in the season, definitely Plymouth, even the defeat at home to Accrington, we had Terrell Thomas who would come out with a ball comfortably. Paul Cannon-By would end up being in the left winger position. We were happy to. It felt like we were happy to let one of the centre halves go in the style of Wilder from Sheffield United. But then, I think you're right. Once the confidence dropped, that was the case. Dominic Francis says, "I think the weather changed." That could be it. To be fair, Plough Lane is like a carpet. We can't even use the excuse of Plough Lane being like a dodgy ground on that sort of side of it. Ray, what do you think? As we sort of wrap up, we can bring George and Anne-Marie in soon. What do you see in the next week? We go into a quarter-final of the Pizza Trophy on Tuesday. Oxford 7 or 8 wins on the trot. It's like a great time to play them. And then we go to Wigan and then Rochdale. What games will Roberts come in for?
I'd almost forgotten about Tuesday night. It's almost irrelevant because the bigger picture is obviously winning games in the league and picking up points. I'm not sure if Robbo's going to change it massively next Saturday. I'm not sure he can, working with what he's got. Whether he'll stay with the 3 centre halves at the back or not, I'm not sure. I thought the ethos in the club was to have every team playing the same way, so the under-18s play that way and the 23s do, and the first team does. Yeah. Whether he's going to mix and match that or not, I don't know. I mean, I'm no tactical genius, but the one thing I did notice about our recent play is when we do try and press, we sort of go hunting in packs in the midfield with perhaps 2 or 3 crowding a player with the ball. And that's great when it works because you can normally trust one of them to sort of nick it off somebody. But when they don't, and there's a clever player, just one pass from them can take 2 or 3 of our team out of the game. And that's the danger, I think. So whether we might need to look at that or not, I don't know.
No, I agree. If they beat the press, then you are in a little bit of trouble. And I remember earlier on the season, we used to press in with our wing backs, with McLaughlin and Seddon. So we literally pressed everyone up. And the amount of times we have one-on-ones, but that's the chance you take on that sort of side of it. Rob, as we wrap up, Wigan away Saturday. It's a big game, isn't it? What do you think Robbo will change it? You've got to be thinking there, Ray, actually. When I used to go down and watch Robbo when he had the under-18s, was always 4-4-2, but that's going back years. Rob, do you think he may? It'd be an interesting thing if he does change formation, wouldn't it, Rob?
I think it would be interesting if he does. I just don't feel like he can. We don't have any wingers in the squad. We're overloaded with centre-backs, centre midfields. I don't think he's got a lot of options. And then, of course, you ain't got target man Ollie Palmer fit, have you? So, I mean, I think maybe if there's ever a time to experiment with a formation, is Tuesday night against Oxford. I don't think too many fans will be disappointed to get dumped out of that cup at this stage. So, if he is going to try a 4-4-2 or a 4-4-2 diamond, I think try it in that game, and see how it goes. But, Wigan is, the next 2 league games, Wigan and Rochdale, they're both 6-pointers really, aren't they? The big games to come into. And that's probably what has forced Joe Palmer to also make the change as well. We need to start picking up points against them too.
Definitely. Well, guys, thank you very much for joining us. Been good to see you both. We don't get to see each other much now, do we? So it's good to see you all. Rob decided to wear the same top as me, so thank you very much for that, Rob. We're making it sure next time that we discuss what we're going to wear. But guys, thank you very much for joining us. Really enjoyed it, and hey, look, let's hope to see you soon. Definitely.
Yeah.
You too.
Thank you. Stay safe, everyone.
Cool. So whilst Anne-Marie and that come in, we're going to quickly chuck her on a quick video, and then we will have them join us in a moment.
We were born for greatness. Somebody sound the alarm. Fire was set in
I thought I'd just finish that. We've watched it already, so I don't think anyone wants to watch it again on that. We have a change. To be fair, Marie, you're a much better replacement than Ray was, so thank you very much for joining us.
Oh, poor Ray.
I'm only joking, Ray. I'm only joking. And George Jones, to be fair, not much between you and Rob, although you've got more hair. But then you don't.
Yeah, I think that's about the only difference.
You have more hair than most people, don't you? Really, to be fair, George. Yeah, welcome. I quite like this. It's like introducing new guests. It's like having a green room, and you just sort of invite the next lot in and so forth.
Well,
like
New Norton.
Anne Marie, how are you? How you been? Have a good New Year, good Christmas?
Yeah, very well. Keeping very well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, it was just a bit of a grim weekend football-wise for everyone, I think. But you know, generally keeping well and just yesterday was not fun. I've got to say, I can't imagine it was fun for anybody at the club. But it's just, I've been speaking to George today. It's just trying to stay positive and see, you know, kind of what the next steps are. Is really where my thoughts are. But outside of football, everything's great. Yeah, thank you.
Well, we can't go anywhere, can we? Let's be fair.
Exactly.
So, with that, George, you're still down in the West Country, aren't you? West Country, that sort of way. I don't know.
Just about. I'm still here. Yeah.
Cool. Well, at least it's a bit safer down there. To be fair, George, isn't it? Apparently, but then no one goes down there, do they? So.
Yeah, that's why it's safer.
Right. Okay. We're trying to cheer it up a little bit because, of course, yes, it's not been great. So obviously we're just discussing with Ray and with Rob in terms of the events yesterday and the game and stuff like that. I suppose just to sort of get your views on really what it was. Anne-Marie, did you think it was inevitable yesterday after that defeat that Glyn was in trouble?
Yeah, I think when that second goal went in, I think there was probably a universal. Everyone knew. It's not a case of whether I think it was the right or wrong decision. I think I was gutted about the timing for him. In terms of doing it sort of straight after the game, I totally understand that why Joe had to do it that way. But from a sort of head and heart point of view, it's just a bit gutted. It eats a little bit into franchise hands. That, you know, it happened on yesterday. But obviously from a logical point of view, yes, you know, it had to be done, and we have to kind of just stop, take a step back and say, what do we do now? So yes, there was an inevitability about it, but I think, you know, Ray and Rob touched on this. We're really, you know, we're still in there. We're still massively in that fight. So I didn't feel total doom and gloom. Like, I'm looking at the table, it's still so achievable, so many games left. And just maybe, you know, it was just time for a fresh pair of eyes to look at what we can do with this squad.
Yeah, George, obviously I know, George, you hate saying anything bad, and I know that, George. But yesterday, that was even for you, that's the most optimistic person I know, that was quite tough yesterday, wasn't it?
Yeah, it weren't good. It was, you know, it wasn't a good performance, and a lot of things that could have gone our way didn't. You know, I think obviously the second goal was a sucker punch, and we were just so unlucky in the manner of that goal. The fact that came straight after the first, that killed, and we might have got back into it. We don't know, but the second went in, it was over, and we all knew we'd be in this sort of position 24 hours later. It's really unfortunate the circumstances that have sort of led to that, but I think, you know, as Stu said, the stats over the last couple of weeks have not been great. Things haven't been going in the right direction. Like Anne-Marie said, I would have liked to have given Glyn at least another week, because I think it's win-win. Even if we go and we lose against Wigan next week and you let Glyn go after that, or Glyn leaves after that, at least he doesn't leave 2 MK. And if we go to Wigan and win, he can build a bit of momentum, and we see where that takes us. I'd have liked to have seen him given at least another week, but I understand why the decision was made for him to go last night.
Totally agree.
Yeah, do you know what? It's really weird when you say that, because from memory, Neil Ardley had the last game at Haringey Borough, wasn't it? The FA Cup game.
Yeah, on the Friday night, yeah.
And that.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. No, because sorry, Stu, but Neil won his last 2 games with us, because we had a Checker Trade Trophy on the Tuesday night, then Haringey in the FA Cup on the Friday night, then we let him go on the Monday. So he won his last 2 games, and clearly, again, the decision had been made the week before that he'd be going, whatever happened in the EFL Trophy or in the FA Cup. So for me, I'd have liked to have seen Glyn given that same option, giving him that final week to try and end on a good note.
I get that. You're saying about the Harrogate Borough, but we tried our best to lose that. Let's be fair. It was a deflected goal.
I know what you mean. It was a perfect performance, Stu. Everything went perfectly that night.
If you remember back to that game, George, they had loads of chances to win it. Like I think we were hanging on for a draw and a replay. Well. Like,
yeah. At least Mitch Pinnock did exactly what he meant to do with that shot. He definitely meant for that to happen.
I don't think he wanted to celebrate that.
No, I don't think Neil did either. To be fair, no. I think where I'm coming from on that is like this. You want to remember your manager when they leave in a good position, like, and you don't tend to get that. No one leaves after promotion, do they, or anything like that? And Neil left after Harrogate, which was a terrible game, and then we have to remember Glyn went after defeat against them. That's what I think hurt me the most, was that I don't like losing to anybody. I don't like losing to them, but to think they had some influence in us losing Glyn. Were you similar on that, Anne-Marie? Because it definitely got
100%, and I think that was actually what hurt the most. Like I said, it was a head and heart. So obviously, the head saying logically, you're looking at the stats, you're looking at performances. It probably on the level of things was the right decision. But I'm totally with George. If it was me, maybe it's just the emotional side of me. But I'd have given it another week, even if we won on Tuesday, and then do it. Just because otherwise, it just gives them, something to feed off, and But there we go. And I totally agree that social media, from what when you were having the chat before, it's a huge amount of pressure on football managers these days. And I think a massive amount of credit has to go to Glyn and Nick, because the circumstances they've been managing under are unbelievable. With the COVID, no fans, the budget, the injuries. They've really, a huge amount of credit has to go to them.
And I think that's the thing, because we spoke to Glyn on Thursday night for the podcast that came out on Friday, and he did touch on those things, and it's the first time he's publicly gone out and said all of these things, the COVID sort of protocols the EFL have enforced on us. Obviously, we've now had multiple outbreaks at the club itself, which, and pretty much the whole playing squad has had it at one stage or another now. It's just one of those things, of all these things that no manager in the history of football has had to deal with, having a relegation budget and trying to keep a team in the Football League whilst doing all of the other off-pitch stuff that he's had to do. And I think he's probably had the hardest job of any manager we've had in our history.
Oh, I agree. You have to wonder, like, he must have thought, what did I walk in, or how many ladders did I walk under to get that much of bad luck in that? And you know what? Full credit to Glyn. You're right, George. Obviously, you were with us for the interview on Thursday, and he brought them up, but he never once allowed them to be an excuse. He didn't want that. Have excuse, but some of the things he was talking about in terms of Zoom meetings before a game, he had to do a Zoom meeting with his team. That there were so many things that this season, I think it's very unfair to judge a manager on this season with so many things against you. In terms of, I remember saying to Glyn about getting team spirit. They couldn't eat lunch together. Or they could take peanut chicken away with them, so of course they were happy. But they couldn't even that sort of, like, when you're up against it, you want to get everyone together, but they couldn't even be in the same room as each other. It's impossible, Anne-Marie, isn't it, to get together?
And I really enjoyed the interview you had with him, and he was very honest. And you're absolutely right; he didn't try and use them as excuses. But so much of being a manager and being a coach and being involved in the backroom staff of a football club is, it's 90% of what's happening before the match. And building that environment, building that culture must have been so difficult during the pandemic. I know, that's not an excuse for, I'm not trying to fully justify why we didn't lose 2-0 yesterday because they can't spend time in the dressing room together as much, but it does add up. And maybe, like we were saying earlier about the characters, maybe the characters haven't been able to flourish as much. They've not been able to get to know each other. But yeah, it's been really tough for Glyn and Nick. But everything that they've brought to the club will still be there as such. So we've learned lots from them. They've given so much, and we can keep moving that forward. It's a kind of evolution, really, of the club, isn't it? it's time to move forward and go from there. And I am a really big Mark Robinson fan. I think he's a super positive guy. He's very intelligent, really, really good person to be taking the reign at the minute. And my personal opinion would be to let's keep him into the end of the season and go from there. I don't know about you guys.
Well, I was going to say George has been. George has worked with Mike Robson when he was working with the academy. I've known Mark for a little while after we interviewed him for a podcast many years ago, and he was really nice. He used to let me go around to where he was behind a dugout, and just I could observe what he was doing. And he did things that I was just. He did things. I think the thing was right in terms of football tactics. They're the same. Everyone's got tactics, but it was how he spoke to people and got them thinking and taking accountability and all those things that really impressed me and made me realise why our academy players come out with. Well, basically, they come out as men. In terms of that, made me really thinking. And George, you've worked with him. I've got a lot of time for Mark Robinson, a lot of time, but you've worked with him, haven't you?
Yeah, I have. I've spent a lot of time when I was working at the academy a couple of years ago. I worked with Robbo, and I spent, shadowing Robbo and working with him in the under-18s, travelling to a couple of games with him, including an FA Youth Cup match. And it just meant, the stuff you see him in the day as the coach, that's, tip top. He's one of the best coaches I've ever seen, and that includes stuff when you watch documentary series on top managers and seeing them. Robbo's certainly up there, in my opinion, as a coach. Also, his management style, that's something which, it really surprised me, because I thought Robbo, when I first met him, I thought he's a lovely bloke, he's an under-18s manager. Will he have that side that a manager needs to have to be that enforcer to put his foot down? And he really did. I think, there was one particular game, it didn't go our way. The players let themselves down in that game we went to. And I was sitting next to a couple of other, the performance analyst for the under-18s at the time, and we were both just saying afterwards, having both seen the performance, even though it hadn't gone our way, but having seen the way Robbo reacted and seeing the way the players reacted to that, we both said to each other that day that, Robbo's going to manage the first team one day. And, whether it's just now for this interim or whether it's, in my personal opinion, I want it to be a longer term thing. But personally, I think, I've seen this, and anyone who knows me, it's been saying, I've been saying for about 5 years since I first met Robbo that Robbo was going to manage our first team one day. And I hope he's given that opportunity now.
Yeah, I agree. So let's go through. So I've got lots of comments coming in. So Jamie Scorer, can we afford to bring in Emma Hayes from Chelsea Ladies or Neil Harris? What is everyone's views on, or do you give a Robbo a chance to turn things around? So we spoke about Robbo, but obviously we've got to replace now. So how do you think we do it this? Because obviously years ago, do you remember we went through the application stage where we asked people to write in if you want to apply for our job? Do you think we're going to do that this time? Do you think we might headhunt this time, Anne-Marie?
I don't know. I mean, you see so much, especially particularly in the Premier League, where that it's all been sorted sort of 2-3 weeks before they've even sacked the manager, and they've got someone all lined up, and that's all done. I'd hope that we as a club, wouldn't be underhand like that, and we gave Glyn the chance, and now we review it. It's not something where we've had these conversations going on. But equally, you've got to make sure you have a backup plan. It's tricky. I've seen so many rumors. I mean, I've never seen so many rumors when we've had a vacancy for a new manager. It's been wild, and I know that happens. But I think it's just about who can get the best out of this squad of players between now and the end of the season in this situation. Who knows them best, and that has to, from my opinion, be the priority. And whoever that is going to have to take, a fair amount of responsibility.
It's interesting. It's interesting you say that, because half of me thinks I hope we have been a little bit looking around what's happening.
Bit cheeky, yeah.
Yeah, and I tell you the reason I think that is because I think that will show that we've evolved as a club. Because I think we have sometimes been wet behind the ears, in my opinion. And yes, you don't want to think that you're talking to somebody, like Watford always have a manager lined up in the car park when they sack a manager, don't they? Just comes in and takes a slot.
Nick Draper, isn't it?
Yeah, Nick loves Watford. But George, what are you thinking on that? Are you thinking that we may have sounded out who's available? And to be fair, the name of Emma Hayes from Chelsea Ladies is a really interesting one. George, are you still with us, or are you frozen? Ah, look, I've shut George up already. I managed to. Whilst George is trying to find a connection somewhere from where he is up here, Anne-Marie, Emma Hayes, what do you think about that?
Oh, have we got George back or
George, are you back, or
I'm back.
Did you deliberately just avoid the question?
No, I'm back. So hopefully I'll be able to answer whatever was said.
Did you hear my question to you?
Can you just
George?
repeat what was? No, I didn't. I didn't even catch the question. I'm afraid.
Okay, George. So I was saying basically, the room. I hope we're going to be. I hope we've been a bit proactive, and we potentially have some targets. Emma Hayes from the Chelsea Ladies has been mentioned. I'm really interested in it. I think it will happen, and if it's going to happen, a club like ours is not out of that question to do that. What do you think, George? And not to put you on the spot, would you say yes or no? But it's an interesting name, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I mean, I'm not. I think personally, I'd rather have someone like Emma Hayes come in than a manager. Certain other managers whose names have been mentioned in sort of and you see on the betting lists and stuff. Because there's other managers who have been around it, never done anything anywhere in particular, or not done anything for about 10 years. For me, I don't think they're the right person for our club. It should be a manager who believes in what we stand for as a club, believes in the project, what we're trying to implement. So for me, I think that means you've got to go for someone who's young, someone who's hungry, someone who wants to really make their stamp in football. So whether that's Emma Hayes, who would be a trailblazer coming into men's football, whether that's Mark Robinson looking to, complete his journey from youth team player to first team manager. All of these options. I think I'd much rather have someone like Emma Hayes rather than Neil Harris, even because I think look at him and he did well at Millwall, but Cardiff fans couldn't wait for him to go. So I'm not sure he's the right option for us. He hasn't played attractive football anywhere. It's always been Route 1. So I don't think he's a realistic option. But yeah, Emma Hayes, I wouldn't be against that. I think that'd certainly be an interesting appointment and one that, it'd put our names down in the history books for the right reasons, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, definitely. Let's go through some comments. Mark Lewis, hope you're well, mate. Nice to see you joining us. What about an experience option just to fight this relegation battle now? Like a League One Sam Allardyce. I don't know who that one is. But then possibly look at the more junior non-league managers in the summer if we are in League Two. Interesting point. Jamie Taylor would love an experienced manager, by the way. And we are joined by Aaron Paul. All right, Aaron. Hope you're well, mate. Aaron agreed with a message about Jerome being a good signing. A manager with a vision would be amazing. The Cowley brothers would be unreal. Can I just quickly say, Aaron is doing an excellent show on BBC Radio 5 at the moment, the Plus 72. He's had some amazing guests. And I couldn't believe it when he got Lyle Taylor on.
You're just saying that because Lyle was on this week.
Why has Lyle joined Aaron? Aaron's done 3 shows and he's already got the best player already on there. Like, how's that happen? But he actually had him with Darren McAntony. If you haven't listened to it, it's brilliant. Charlie Austin was on one of the shows. I've never known a footballer to be so frank and blunt about football. It's a really good listen. So if you get a chance,
it was refreshing, wasn't it, Stu? I watched it as well.
Did you hear him? He was amazing, wasn't he?
Yeah, I did. I thought it was really refreshing because they were openly talking and talking about topics which tend to be a bit more of a taboo in football these days, and it was nice. Really good listen.
Yeah, and to be fair, Aaron does a great job.
And obviously, Aaron coming. Yeah, and I mean, you can tell that. I mean, Aaron, obviously, we met him when he was at the top of the world at Love Sport Radio. Then he moved and did our Sunday night Discord show. I know his career's not gone the way he wanted, and he's now having to do his evening show on 5 Live to a national audience. But don't worry, you can come back, Aaron. You can bounce back to our Discord show one day.
To be fair, he gets chucked to all the lovely places. He was actually at Cardiff yesterday. I was amazed he didn't go to Newport. Aaron, it's only down the road, probably about 2 lifetimes away on that side. But if you want to listen to the Lyle Taylor one with Darren McAntony, it's like a loving. But yeah, it's really good. Have a listen to it. It's excellent on that side of it. So actually, go back to Mark Lewis's one. What about that in terms of a League One Sam Allardyce? I know what he means by that. Who would we say is a League One Sam Allardyce? Ian Holloway, Tony Pulis, who didn't survive long at Sheffield Wednesday. Anne-Marie, what do you think? Do you think that's needed? Do you think we can have an old school you know what I mean? Like, jokingly, it was called the quarter to three manager because you come in, shout at them, go out,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
video follow up. Do you think we need that, or is there? Can
Well,
it even work now?
it's definitely interesting because, you know, it's like we said, we need somebody who can come in and get the best out of the players we've got, because there's not really, I mean, there's a couple of days left for the transfer window. We've got loads of loan players. And, you know, there are managers out there like Sam Allardyce. I mean, Guardiola called him a genius the other day. They've obviously just got a different approach to the game. They're being brought in because it's a results-based business. They're coming in, and their main focus is just to win at any cost. That isn't always the most popular approach, and that comes with certain, you know, ways, different styles of leadership and management. I don't know who would be the League One Allardyce, though. I mean, yeah, I'm not sure on that. Whether it's tricky, because then it really comes down to, are we saying we have to just stay up at any cost and we'll get whoever in to do that? It's not guaranteed, though. Whoever comes in, that it's not guaranteed that we will.
Yeah.
But
And to be fair to
And
Sam
I think
Allardyce,
that's the
go
thing.
on, George.
I think that was the thing, because it's not a guarantee it works. I mean, you look at Allardyce at West Brom, he hasn't really improved them much from when Bilic was there. You look at them, West Brom are still going to go down realistically. You'd expect them to now anyway. So getting in this sort of old school, you know, like Stu says, quarter three manager, that doesn't work. I don't think that works as well anymore. And it's certainly not a guarantee, you know, solve all your problems. So for me, I'd be completely against someone like that, because with Glyn, we have started implementing a long-term vision, a long-term plan. You know, we're signing players from non-league. We continue that today with signing from Kingstonian, signing young players and implementing that, integrating them with academy prospects and academy graduates, and having a young, hungry team similar to what Wimbledon FC did, you know, on our way up through Divisions 4 and 3 back in the 70s. So for me, it's not a surprise that, you know, that's the plan, because that's what, you know, Glyn knew. But for me, I'm so desperate for us to continue that plan, because that plan will work. It's not great to watch now, and it might not be perfect in a year, but in a couple of years, you're going to start to really see dividends from that. You're going to start to see players really grow, really start to develop, and then we'll start climbing up the league. Hopefully, that will still be League One, or you'll be fighting for promotion back into League One. And we'll be able to sell on players for a profit, and then reintegrate that, and, you know, that'll help with finances off the pitch as well. So for me, I think it's all about implementing that long-term vision. And if you get someone in with the aim of just for staying up for 6 months, they're going to throw that out the window, and you're back to square one. And where we were under sort of Neil after our promotion of 10 in, 10 out every year, with a squad of players who were just, you know, 30-year-old mercenaries for a paycheck. Whereas
George,
I think the long-term vision is the best thing.
You're being very ageist, George. Very ageist on that. And I have to defend Sam Allardyce. That I'm sure he could defend himself. But this will be the first time he's been relegated if he does pick up West Brom, and he has.
he's always stable, isn't he?
Yeah, so George, I think you're being a little bit unfair to Sam Allardyce. And to be fair, it's probably better coming from me than coming from Sam Allardyce, to be fair. What I would also say very quickly is Sam Allardyce was the first person to use the stats in terms of area. I don't know, final third entries. He was the first person to use it at Bolton. He was well ahead of his time, George. So I think you need to pay a bit of respect to Mr. Allardyce on that sort of side of it. Mark Lewis, I don't like Allardyce, by the way. Why'd you mention him, Mark? Let's have a look. Mark Lewis actually just chucked a good name in, actually. Alan Pardew.
Is he out in India at the minute? Isn't he? Is that right? Or did I read that somewhere?
I'm not sure. I don't know if I wanted to dance though. Like that dance he done after the FA Cup goal was a little bit.
Oh god!
But he could be the League One.
But again, I think
he could be League One Sam Allardyce.
I think Alan Pardew is someone who he hasn't done a huge amount in a managerial career in terms of successes, and he's got no League One experience, and yet he'd be a very expensive option. And he wouldn't be in. Look, if we got Pardew in, can you honestly say he'd be here in 5 years? No, he wouldn't. He'd be gone in 2, for one reason or another.
But you could argue that
for me, I think having a long-term
stay for more than Neil Hardy stayed for 6 years. Since then, we've had 3 managers, George. So is there a long term?
Then I'd argue our most successful. But then I'd say our most successful managers have been the ones we've had for 5 or so years. You know, Terry, Neil, etc. The best managers we've had have been when they've been given time. And Anne-Marie touched on it earlier. The best managers are the ones who, you know, have long time at the club. You know, whether they're at, you know,
George, you've got a bit of
Ainsworth
interference on your
or, you
microphone,
know,
George. You've got
is
a
this
bit of
better?
interference. Yeah, it must
Can
be
you
your
hear me now?
hair. Yeah, must be your hair, George. Sorry about that. Go on.
Yeah, so being but about, you know, managers improve as they have long spells at the club. If you just keep chopping and changing your manager every single season, it doesn't work, and you end up, you know, like I said earlier, 10 in, 10 out every summer, and no club identity. Whereas if you have a manager in for a long spell, someone who's implementing a long-term strategy of developing young talents, and, you know, back to what Wimbledon FC had back in the day, it's one of those opportunities where I think he'd be mad to do anything other than that. And I mean, I know looking at the chat, a lot of options are coming through. You know, someone said Chris Powell, but again, you know, that's an interesting one. But again, you look at what he did at Southend. He didn't really implement a long-term strategy there. So, I mean, I know I said it at the top of the show, but for me, you know, I think either you go for Robbo or you go for someone a bit left field like Emma Hayes.
Yeah,
Or
Anne-Marie,
taking you.
yeah, well, you've named everyone there, George. um, interesting. One thing George said, and I know from chatting to George many times about this long-term strategy. I don't disagree with George on it. However, I worry that a long-term strategy could end up you dropping through the leagues and then being struggling with that. The Dons Trust board obviously got a new, loads of new people in there, and they're looking at a strategy for the club. Do you think we need to include that now for what's on the pitch? Because realistically, we have 3 managers in 3 years. Do you think we need to look at that? Because maybe we aren't giving them the support. You know, do we need to have a certain style? Do we need to have a certain tactic? What do you think? Do you think we need to look at that now?
I guess, you know, internally they will have an idea or a vision of where they want to be by certain times. They'll have targets, and certain, you know, like Joe's quite explicitly said, we want League One survival. That's what we need as a club. I expect that kind of there'll be short term and a long term vision at sort of running parallel to each other. You know, long term, we'd love to have more Will Nightingales coming through and really developing this academy like the old Wimbledon FC. But equally, you know, in the short term, we need to be getting these results so that we can ultimately build our fan base, when we can get back to plough lane. We know that, you know, positive performances, good results brings fans in. You know, it's quite a simple football equation for most clubs. I expect that they long term that they'll really want to put a lot of emphasis, especially post pandemic. There'll be more of an emphasis on the academy, bringing in, because with the clubs just won't necessarily consistently have the money to be making transfers, and will want to sort of grow those players from within. That's what I expect. I think lots of other clubs have said the same, particularly sort of the higher levels of non-league, that they want to kind of get their own homegrown players, and I expect that to be a big part of our vision. And I'm sure the Dons Trust would be keen on that as well. I can't speak for them, but I should imagine, you know, it's that's what this club has always traditionally been about, and it also makes a lot of logical sense.
Yeah. Just quickly, by the way, this is my cat behind me. You can see something moving behind my head. It's not an extension of my head. This is Molly, who is my shadow most times on that. So, George, as we sort of wrap up in all sort of 5-10 minutes, how long do you think we should take? So, we need to make a decision, don't we? So, it's either going to be Robbo long term, i.e., to end of the season, or we're going to get somebody in. But something's got to happen very quickly. You know, our next, if you look at the games in February, I don't want to scare you all too much, but if we look at it, Wigan away, Rochdale at home, Peterborough away, Gillingham at home, Hull City at home, all before the end of the month. At the moment, I don't see where points are coming from, George. So do you think it's important that Joe and the Dons Trust board, because I understand they're both going to be involved in that, do you think it's important now to really get on top of this? So if they are giving Robbo 3 games, so if they're giving him, for argument's sake, the pizza game, Wigan and Rochdale to make it, or do you think they need to get, you know, i.e. get someone in next week? Because my gut feeling is there's going to be a short list. I don't think Robbo will have the job unless he does something outstanding, which isn't beyond Robbo, to be fair.
I mean, I think the most important thing is that they give Robbo the full backing they can for as long as he's got, whether that's the 3 days or 3 weeks or 3 years, however long that's going to be. They need to back him, and I think that starts especially over the next 24 hours. We've come towards the end of the transfer window. We've been led to believe there's a small amount of money left to get a player in potentially. And if we're going to do that, we have to try and keep that momentum and say to Robbo, we were going to trust Glyn to get someone in. So hopefully Robbo's going to be able to be given that and get a player in, because that's the most important thing for the next 48 hours. After that, then I think the decision has to be made, I'd say, preferably around the Wigan game. Because, I mean, after the Wigan game, it's a free Tuesday night. So whoever's coming in, whether that be Robbo or an external hire, if they can start Monday, they have a full week training with the players before a game. And any new manager would say that's key. So I think realistically, they've got a week to, make up their minds and implement that strategy and get whoever's going to come in, or tell Robbo.
Oh, it's a shame we've lost him again. That's a good one.
I'll just sort of add to what he's saying. I was just going to, regardless of whether, someone comes in tomorrow or it ends up being Mark, whatever happens, I think George is absolutely right. Mark goes into probably a training today. He goes in, he knows his squad inside out already. So we've got that advantage. If you have someone new come in, they've got to get to know everybody. They've got to get to know the culture, and you can get teething problems. That can take some time. It'll take months and months for a manager to establish their vision and their way of leadership and what they want to achieve from the team. Whereas at least Mark coming in, he knows the players, and so that saves time on that front. And he may well have his own style of wanting to play that is different from Glyn. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. Do you know what? A name that's getting mentioned by a lot of people is Neil Harris. A lot of people. I see it, if I'm being honest with you. If you can survive Millwall, you can survive anywhere. And he went to Cardiff after that, so he's obviously a sucker for punishment. But if I'm honest with you, I quite like the idea of a Neil Harris, if he's interested. What would be your... I suppose we can get onto it now. George, my first choice would be the Cowley brothers, if we could, because they love a project and we are a project. So that's me who I would probably want to go for. George, I know Robbo is very much higher, and to be fair, I'd say the reason I don't want Robbo to probably get full time is because I wouldn't want Robbo. Unfortunately, sometimes the only way you leave a club is by out the door. And I think Robbo's better than that, and I would love to have Robbo involved in that continuous link, because he's great to have around the club. That's my worry with that. But George, I know you like Robbo, but if it wasn't Robbo, who would you be looking to approach? George, I've done all that and you've just frozen me. Anne-Marie's
It must be colder where he is. It keeps freezing. I think, like I've obviously made it clear that I think that for me, best case scenario at the minute is for Mark to have the gig till the end of the season. I've certainly find the rumours around Emma Hayes. I find that really exciting. I think it's really interesting. It certainly shouldn't be, lots of people are very dismissive about it. I won't, fully get into that. I'm a huge Emma Hayes fan. And, so many of the skills are totally transferable into men's football. My only concern would be she's not got those networks built up in that side of football that I'm aware of. And so in terms of, when we're loaning players, it takes so long to build those relationships. And I don't think that she'll necessarily have that, unlike where she's in women's football, she's second to none on that front. And in terms of her knowledge and tactics of the game, that is seamless and transferable, and it should have happened years ago. I'm sure a whole podcast for another night on that front. But Neil Harris, he has got those networks already developed. I was a massive fan of him as a player. I know, obviously, Millwall, not everyone's cup of tea. I think he could be interesting if Mark doesn't get the gig. I think I would certainly fully support him if he did come in. I remember Eric Samuelson saying he used to have a great relationship with Millwall. The club did, and over the years we've had some fantastic players come in from there, and yeah, it's certainly interesting. I think he's a clever guy. I don't think he was necessarily given enough time at Cardiff to make it work. But
Yeah, and do you know what? The good thing about that, the good thing about Neil Harris is that Millwall fans love him, so we'd all be safe. If we had
yeah,
to go to Millwall away, we're all right, haven't we? We're looked after. We got Neil and the coach with us.
he's got our back. Yeah.
Yeah, do you know what I mean? Yeah, you know what? Emma Haynes is an interesting one, and you never know sometimes if it's just a name that's chunked out because it is there. But I don't recall her being linked with manager post previously. I might be wrong, but I don't recall that. But yeah, I think where's the one I've got? There's just someone who said basically about contacts, very much what you were saying in terms of. Yeah, I do question where motivation. I don't know what your real name is. I do question whether Emma Haynes would have the contacts in men's football.
Yeah,
But
that would be my biggest concern around it. I mean, like I said, in terms of technicalities, no issues at all. I think it's bonkers to think that you couldn't transfer that into men's football, but it is those contacts.
And do you know what? It also,
I think that's going to be a big thing.
Go on.
I think that's going to be a big thing of, if someone comes in, whether that be someone like Robbo or Jason Newell, who's coming from an academy setup, or whether that is Emma Hayes coming.
George, I think the free internet's run out after like 9 o'clock or
8:45. They've run out.
I'm back, hopefully. Can you hear me now?
George. Yeah, I can hear you now, mate.
Yeah, so I mean, I was saying the assistant manager for either of those three candidates is going to be seriously important because they need someone with experience in the men's side of the game to try and bring that forward. Whether that be someone who's been a manager in their own right at some level of men's football, or someone who's been an assistant manager or
Yeah, I hadn't considered that. To be fair, jumping in for Georgia, I hadn't considered, the fact that often they come as a pair, manager and assistant manager these days, and that will, it's a big part of what happens next, really, and who will, and in the interim, who's going to come in as assistant for Robbo.
Yeah, and you know what? We've done well getting Stephen Reid. I can't remember now who Stephen Reid's. He's number 2, so I can't remember now. But Stephen Reid was a really,
he's at Scotland.
Is he?
That's it. How can I forget he was up there? He won't stay there long. It's too cold, George. But a really good number 2. And yeah, you know what? I'm thinking like Neil Harris and Paul Robinson at Millwall at the moment. I know we don't like all these old connections, but the reason we go for them is because actually we trust them. Look at Paul Robinson when he was with us on that sort of side of it. Okay, so we're gonna sort of wrap up. What are our thoughts? How do we think we're going to do this month? It's been difficult, isn't it? It's been difficult. We are a little bit attached, games in hand, teams above us, a couple of games in hand. How do you think it's going to play out, George? What's your gut feeling?
I think it's going to be tough. I mean, I think a lot of it depends on the manager we get in. I think if we go in and we get someone like Neil Harris, who's going to try and keep us up but won't play attractive football, that might do.
We've never played attractive football, though, George.
That's part of the person's spec, isn't it? When they apply for the job.
Yeah, can you get a ball on?
Sorry, I'm back now. When did you lose me?
We've lost you. Well, to be fair, George, a whole show, but no, I'm only joking.
So I was going to say, Neil Harris, it will work short term potentially, whereas someone, like Emma Hayes.
Okay, I think we're struggling with George on there. It's an interesting thing, isn't it, Anne-Marie, in terms of long term? I get worried about long term, and there's been some notes here in saying, where is it? I just saw James Taylor. Do you keep someone for 5 years, even if they end up getting relegated? That's the problem. When you look at a long-term solution, football fans nowadays, we're going to Plough Lane and we're going to attract newer fans, hopefully younger fans, families. But the culture now is that no one expects a manager to be in a job for more than a year. So for us to do a long-term strategy, that's a very difficult thing to. When things go wrong, people get edgy, don't they?
Yeah, and I think it might be the situation we're in as well. So I think for some clubs where we were saying, if they've showed more loyalty, as it were, they may well be in a position where they own their stadium and they've been there sort of mid-table. They're consistent. It's reliable. Whereas we're in this situation where we've got the new stadium. There's so much going on behind the scenes, and we're not necessarily in a position where we can fully stick it out with one person right now, unlike other clubs who might, be able to. I'm just trying to think of an example, like the chap who was at Exeter for a long time.
Yeah, Tisdale.
Yeah, I know, I'm not a massive fan of him these days, but he was given a lot of time, but they were stable. And I'm not saying we're not stable, but we are in a phase of transition with the new stadium, and we're trying to rebrand and everything. So we can't necessarily, have someone to steady the ship. Who we want to keep in for like 10, 15 years. It might not be feasible right now.
George, going to wrap it up because obviously I know your internet connection's dodgy with that. Did you notice, George, that we had the most exciting digital advertising boards yesterday? They were just amazing. It feels like, do you remember I was saying to you, George, like, I always have like these little milestones. Like, one was getting our score on Sky Sports, then was having blue and yellow nets, then having a new ground, and now we have electronic, what they called, advertising boards. But we've got to sort that Rygas one out. It's an extra floodlight, isn't it, George? George, are you doing this deliberately just to?
I actually messaged George during the match yesterday on behalf of my dad, who was asking are the electronic advertising boards permanent? Are they staying there? As long as they don't break any more of our players or a call came by.
Oh yeah, you have to.
Guy.
Yeah, that annoyed me, if I'm being honest with you, because I think that was a danger, and that was not right. George, I know you're sort of flitting back and out. We're gonna wrap up now, George. I appreciate you've probably got a lot to say, but your internet connection will never hang on that long enough for you. Thank you very much for joining us, George. Thank you very much for joining us from the outer area of no internet connection.
It's probably all the phone calls from the club asking George to be manager that's just blocking his signal.
Even the last 5 minutes, it'd be no long time to lose them.
George out.
On that side. Anne-Marie, thank you for joining us. It's been very nice for you to join us. It's been very interesting to hear your views.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Cool. And good to see you both. Let's hope that we can see each other soon at Plough Lane on that side. But we've had thank you everyone that's joined us. We've had a really good, strong, about 60, 70 listening all the time. So thank you for the interaction. And we may well do this again George just wants to go. We may do this again when we get someone else in. So thank you for joining us, and we will see you soon.
Take care.